The clock had just struck 3 a.m. when Mariah Evans dragged the ragged cloth across yet another table at Harper's Diner. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, harsh and unkind, highlighting the exhaustion carved deep into her eyes. Her body ached from 16 relentless hours on her feet, yet her shift was far from over. On the surface, it was just another night, serving black coffee to weary truckers and reheating pie for strangers. But beneath her forced smile, Mariah's world was teetering on the edge of collapse. In her apron pocket lay a crumpled eviction notice, its bold letters haunting her every movement. 48 hours to vacate. Unless she could come up with $1,200. The small apartment she shared with her grandmother would no longer be theirs. That apartment wasn't just a roof over their heads. It was the fragile sanctuary where her grandmother, Lillian, was slowly recovering after her latest heart scare. The thought of losing it while Lillian's health was so delicate made Mariah's chest tighten with panic. As if the threat of homelessness weren't enough, her phone buzzed earlier with another reminder from the hospital's billing department. Payment overdue. Every visit, every pill, every test for Lillian stacked into a mountain Mariah couldn't climb no matter how many double shifts she picked up. Each day was a race against time, against bills, against exhaustion, against the gnawing fear that one misstep could shatter everything she was holding together. But Mariah wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered easily. She had learned resilience from Lillian, who had worked 2 jobs to raise her after her parents passed. That same strength now fueled Mariah, even as her sneakers wore thin and her spirit faltered. She told herself she could endure the aching feet, the endless nights, and the gnawing hunger in her own stomach, if only it meant protecting the one person who had always protected her. The customers at Harper's saw only a tired waitress refilling cups of coffee. What they didn't see was the quiet war she was fighting, a battle against poverty, time, and fate itself. And, though Mariah felt like she had nothing left to give, she clung to one fragile hope, that, somehow, in the middle of this storm, she would find a way to keep her grandmother safe, and their home intact. The night had grown quiet inside Harper's Diner, save for the low hum of fluorescent lights, and the clatter of Mariah Evans' weary footsteps. She rubbed her sore wrists and tried not to think about the eviction notice tucked deep in her apron pocket. The diner had thinned out too. Just a few stragglers. A trucker finishing his 4th refill of coffee, and an elderly woman methodically pushing pieces of apple pie across her plate. For a moment, Mariah thought she might make it through the rest of her shift without incident. But then the bell above the door chimed, and her tired eyes fell on a sight that made her pause. A man stepped inside, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit that seemed entirely out of place in the rundown diner. His polished shoes clicked softly against the worn tiles, and the gleam of an expensive watch caught the light when he adjusted his cuff. But it wasn't his appearance that struck Mariah the most. It was his expression, the quiet exhaustion behind his dark eyes, the heaviness that seemed to cling to his broad shoulders like invisible chains. Clinging to his hands were 2 little girls, no older than 7, identical except for the ribbons in their hair. One wore pink, the other purple, their matching coats buttoned all the way up to their chins. They looked nervous, tired, and most of all hungry. The pink-ribboned girl tugged gently at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I'm hungry," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I know, Clara," the man murmured, his tone filled with affection but strained by something heavier. "I'm trying to figure out what we can order." He picked up the menu with one hand, but Mariah noticed how his jaw tightened as he scanned the prices, his phone buzzing with message after message he couldn't seem to ignore. From behind the counter, Mariah watched them for a long moment. Something in the little girl's restless shifting tugged at her heart. They reminded her too much of herself as a child, leaning against her grandmother in hospital waiting rooms, stomach aching with hunger but too afraid to say the words out loud. She swallowed hard and forced a bright smile onto her face before stepping forward. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft but steady. "My name's Mariah. Can I get you folks started with something warm tonight?" The man looked up at her, and for the briefest second, their eyes met. His were deep brown, lined with fatigue, yet holding a gentleness that caught her off guard. He hesitated, as if unsure what to say, before answering cautiously. "We're still deciding. The girls are tired, and I just want to make sure we order something they'll actually eat." That was when the purple-ribboned girl piped up with the unfiltered honesty only children possessed. "Daddy always burns pancakes." For the first time all day, Laughter slipped from Mariah's lips. Well, lucky for you, our cook makes the best pancakes in the city. Fluffy as clouds, with real maple syrup. What do you say? Want to give them a try? Both girls lit up instantly, nodding with excitement. Their father hesitated once more, then finally gave in. The pancakes sound perfect. And coffee for me. Black. Mariah walked away to place the order, but not before overhearing the little girl's whisper. He looks sad again. Clara said softly, maybe the nice lady can make him smile. Her twin, Elise, replied. The words hit Mariah like a stone in her chest. She understood exactly what they meant. Children worried about the weight their parent carried, just as she worried endlessly about her grandmother. They were strangers, yet their struggles mirrored her own. When the pancakes were ready, she carried them over with as much care as if she'd prepared them herself. Here we go, she said warmly, setting the plates before the girls. Made with extra love tonight. The twins wasted no time digging in, their little mouths full of syrup and laughter. These are the best pancakes ever, Elise announced, syrup smeared across her chin. Better than the fancy hotel, Clara added proudly. For the first time since they'd entered the diner, their father's lips curved into a smile. It wasn't wide or flashy, but it was real, a quiet, grateful smile that made Mariah's chest ache, with something she couldn't quite name. How much do I owe you? He asked, pulling his wallet from his pocket. Mariah hesitated. She knew she couldn't afford generosity. She knew every penny mattered. Right now. But something deeper than fear pushed her forward. Tonight, it's on the house, she said softly. Consider it Harper's special welcome. The man blinked in surprise. I can't let you do that. Sometimes, she interrupted gently, we all just need a little kindness from strangers. And, besides, your girls are absolute angels. You deserve one small thing to go right today. His composure cracked then, just a little. His eyes glistened as he nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you, he whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. Mariah only smiled, even as she knew the risk she was taking. Free meals could get her fired, and she was already standing on the edge of disaster. But watching those two little girls beam, as if Christmas morning had come early, she knew she had made the right choice. When they finally stood to leave, the man placed a $20 bill on the table. For the table. Excellent service, he said quietly. Before Mariah could protest, the girls rushed over and wrapped their small arms around her legs. Thank you for the best dinner ever, Clara said earnestly. You're the nicest waitress in the whole world, Elise added with a grin. Mariah felt tears sting her eyes as they skipped out the door, their father trailing behind with one last glance in her direction. And though the $20 bill in her hand couldn't erase her overdue rent or pay for her grandmother's medicine, it felt like something greater, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, a spark of kindness could light the way forward. As the diner door swung shut behind them, Mariah stood in the quiet room with the faint scent of syrup still lingering in the air. For just a moment, she allowed herself to believe in miracles. 3 nights after that unexpected act of kindness, the bell above Harper's diner rang again, and Mariah Evans looked up instinctively. Her heart skipped when she saw the familiar sight: 2 little girls racing ahead of their father, their ribbons bouncing as they hurried through the door. Clara spotted her first, pointing with an excited squeal. There she is, Daddy, the pancake lady. Elise tugged at her father's hand, her eyes bright. Can we sit in her section, please? Daniel Bennett. Mariah now knew his name smiled faintly, though fatigue still shadowed his face. If Miss Mariah doesn't mind. Mariah wiped her hands on her apron and approached with genuine warmth. Well, if it isn't. My favorite customers. Back again already? I must have done something right. The girls climbed into a booth near the window, chattering about school and horses and books, while Mariah handed them menus. Daniel, however, seemed quieter this time. There was a softness to him now, as if the memory of that first meal still lingered. His eyes, though tired, held a flicker of gratitude that made Mariah's pulse quicken in a way she didn't fully understand. They began returning regularly, first once a week, then twice. Sometimes in the evening, after school, sometimes on weekends when Daniel wanted to give the girls a break from takeout. It wasn't long before the diner staff jokingly referred to them as Mariah's family, though she pretended not to blush at the implication. Clara and Elise quickly grew attached, running to hug her at every visit. They told her about their favorite teachers, their imaginary games, and even secrets about how Daddy burns toast every morning. What touched Mariah most was the way they began to include her in their Conversations as though she had always belonged in their world. "She's so nice, Daddy," Elise whispered one evening when she thought Mariah couldn't hear. "Maybe she could teach you to cook so we don't have to eat rubber eggs anymore." Daniel's cheeks flushed as he tried to shush his daughter, but Mariah only laughed softly. "Cooking lessons, huh? Well, maybe we could arrange something." That offhand remark soon turned into reality. On a chilly Sunday afternoon, Daniel invited Mariah to their apartment for a beginner's course in pancakes. Mariah hesitated at first, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory. Yet something about the twins' hopeful eyes and Daniel's quiet sincerity made her agree. When she arrived, however, it wasn't an apartment at all. It was a penthouse high above the city, with glass walls overlooking Chicago's skyline. She froze at the sight, her worn winter coat feeling suddenly out of place in such luxury. The kitchen alone was bigger than her entire apartment. The twins greeted her with squeals of delight. "You came," Clara cried, wrapping her arms around Mariah's waist. "We didn't think you really would." Daniel emerged from the kitchen, looking strangely nervous in dark jeans and a sweater, instead of his usual suit. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." Mariah forced a smile, though her heart hammered with unease. "I promised your daughters, didn't I? And I try not to break promises." The cooking lesson was filled with laughter and small, surprising moments of intimacy. Daniel fumbled with measuring cups, nearly overstirred the batter, and burned the first pancake beyond recognition. The twins giggled at his clumsiness while Mariah gently guided his hand, showing him the trick of flipping at just the right moment. Their hands brushed, sending an unexpected spark racing through her chest. "You're a fast learner," she teased as he successfully flipped a golden pancake on his third try. "Only because I have an excellent teacher," he replied, his voice low, his eyes lingering on hers longer than they should have. The girls, oblivious to the tension, clapped as if their father had just won a gold medal. "See? She makes everything better," Elise announced proudly. It was in those moments, surrounded by the smell of maple syrup and the sound of childish laughter, that Mariah realized how deeply she had begun to care for this little family. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of something more than survival. But questions gnawed at her. Why was a man who clearly lived in wealth eating in a run-down diner? Why did he always look so heavy with worry? And why, despite his obvious success, did his daughters look at her with the kind of hope children usually reserve for fairy tales? The answers came later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed. Mariah stayed behind to help Daniel wash dishes, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. At one point, she asked, gently, "If you don't mind me asking, where is their mother?" Daniel's hand stilled on the soapy plate. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the drip of water from the faucet. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with unspoken grief. "She passed. Cancer. 2 years ago." Mariah's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded, swallowing hard. "The girls. They've been stronger than I ever was. Children have a resilience adults can't seem to manage. But since then, I've been drowning in work, trying to fill the void with success. It never works. At the end of the day, I come home and realize money doesn't tuck them in at night. It doesn't make up for what they lost." His vulnerability caught her off guard. For weeks, she had wondered what shadows haunted his gaze. Now she understood. This man wasn't just tired, he was grieving. And then came the revelation she never expected. When she asked what kind of work kept him so occupied, Daniel finally admitted, almost reluctantly, "I run a technology company. Bennett Innovations. It's T.A.J. done well over the years." Mariah blinked. She had heard the name before. Bennett Innovations wasn't just doing well, it was a billion-dollar empire. Which meant the man standing before her, the man burning pancakes and laughing softly when his daughters teased him, wasn't just a struggling widower. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city. She tried to hide her shock, but he noticed. "I don't usually tell people. Not right away. Money has a way of changing how people see you. I'd rather be judged for the father I am, not the bank account I carry." Mariah met his gaze, seeing not the billionaire, but the man, the tired, grieving father who would give everything to see his daughters smile again. "They don't need your money, Daniel," she said softly. "They need you." For a moment, silence filled the penthouse, heavy with unspoken truth. Then, slowly, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's what you keep reminding me." And I think that's why. They've already decided you belong here. Mariah flushed, shaking her head. They're just children. Children, Daniel said gently, often see the truth before adults do. The week had barely begun when Mariah Evans' fragile world unraveled further. She walked to Harper's diner expecting another grueling shift, only to be met by her manager, Pete, holding an envelope that seemed far heavier than its paper weight should allow. Sorry, kid, Pete muttered, unable to meet her eyes. Corporate's cutting hours. You're still part-time, so. Mariah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Her schedule stared back at her. 3 shifts instead of 6. Her income slashed in half. Even with the meager tips she could hope for, it wouldn't be enough. Not for rent. Not for food. Not for the mountain of medical bills. Waiting at home, she tried to protest. Pete, I need those hours. My grandmother. He shook his head sadly. If I could change it, I would. But Jenny's got seniority. Marcus has. Been here years. My hands are tied. Mariah nodded numbly, forcing herself to walk into the kitchen as if nothing had changed. But inside, her chest burned with panic. Her grandmother's doctors had just confirmed what she already feared. Lillian needed heart valve replacement surgery. Soon. Even with insurance, the copays and related costs would total $15,000. A number so impossibly large, it might as well have been $1 million. That night, she sat beside her grandmother's hospital bed, trying to hide her tears. We'll figure it out, Lillian whispered, her frail hand squeezing Mariah's. We always do. But Mariah wasn't so sure this time. When Daniel Bennett called the next day, his voice was gentle, even hopeful. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner. Just the two of us. Somewhere nice. For a moment, Mariah's heart soared. The thought of sitting across from him, of laughing and talking without the constant interruptions of the diner, felt like something out of a dream. But then reality crashed in. Dinner at one of his restaurants would cost more than her weekly groceries. Her nicest dress was one she wore to church. And she was about to be evicted. She forced a smile he couldn't see through the phone. This week's complicated. Work. Stuff. Maybe next week. Of course, Daniel said, a hint of disappointment in his tone. Whenever you're ready. But Mariah knew she could never be ready, not for a world like his. The truth came crashing down harder a few days later, when she saw his name on the cover of a magazine in the hospital cafeteria. Tech titan Daniel Bennett announces major expansion. The photo showed the same man she'd taught to flip pancakes, the same man who laughed awkwardly at his daughter's teasing, except here, he stood polished and powerful, a billionaire, whose company was valued at billions. Mariah's stomach churned. All those nights he'd hesitated over simple diner meals, she realized now, it hadn't been about money. It had been about her. Testing her. Watching how she reacted. And she, foolishly, had believed they were equals, two weary souls just trying to survive the day. She slammed the magazine shut, her pride screaming louder than her heart. If he was a billionaire, what did that make her? A charity project. A story he could tell at dinner parties. The kind waitress who gave us free pancakes, so I helped her out in return. The thought made her skin burn with shame. When Daniel called again, his voice carried concern. Mariah, are you all right? You sound distant. I'm fine, she lied, her throat tight. But I think maybe we should slow things down. Slow down? I don't understand. Sunday you were laughing, planning our next lesson. What? Changed? She closed her eyes, forcing the words out before she lost her nerve. We're from different worlds, Daniel. You should spend time with people who fit in yours. Not someone like me. The silence on the other end felt endless. Finally, he spoke, his voice flat. If that's what you want, it is. He paused, then added softly, the girls will be disappointed. They've been looking forward to Sunday all week. Mariah's chest tightened like a vice. The twins' bright eyes, their hopeful whispers, their innocent matchmaking, it all shattered in her mind. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe Mrs. Henderson can teach you instead. She probably knows her way around a wire. Kitchen. Daniel's voice was cold now, clipped. Right. Of course. Thank you, Mariah. For everything. The line went dead. At Harper's the next evening, Mariah busied herself wiping tables that didn't need wiping. The diner was quiet, but her heart was in chaos. When the bell above the door rang, she glanced up instinctively, half hoping it was Daniel and the girls. Instead, it was a stranger. Still, she kept thinking about them, Clara's proud little grin, Elise's innocent giggles. There, whispered Plea. Maybe she can be our new mommy. The thought broke her. She had let them down. Meanwhile, at Daniel's penthouse, two disappointed little girls sat cross-legged on the living room floor. Daddy, why isn't Miss Mariah coming back? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Daniel sighed heavily, running a hand through his dark hair. Sometimes grown-ups, things just get complicated. Did you make her mad? Elise asked, frowning. No, he said quietly, though he wasn't sure. At least, I hope not. Then why doesn't she want to see us? Clara pressed, her eyes wide with confusion. Daniel had no answer. The truth was, he didn't know either. All he knew was that the laughter she brought into their lives was gone. And without it, the silence of the penthouse felt heavier than ever. Mariah spent that night at her friend Keisha's cramped studio, lying on an air mattress with the eviction notice crumpled beside her. She could still smell syrup and coffee, still hear Clara and Elise giggling about pancakes. But those sounds were only memories now, replaced by the buzzing of her phone with another hospital bill she couldn't pay. She buried her face in her hands and wept, not just for her grandmother, not just for herself, but for the family she had almost let herself believe she could belong to. And for the first time, she wondered if kindness had been a mistake. Daniel Bennett had built an empire by uncovering truths others overlooked, yet nothing struck him harder than the discovery of Mariah Evans' hidden struggle. It came to him in the most unexpected way, a phone call mistakenly routed to his office. Billing Department, Chicago General Hospital, the voice on the line said. We're calling about patient Lillian Evans. Surgery cannot be scheduled until payment is arranged. Daniel froze. He knew that name. He had heard it from Mariah's lips, spoken with love and worry. Lillian was her grandmother, the anchor of her world. His chest tightened as the coordinator explained the situation. Valve replacement surgery, $15,000. Urgent. Without it, her health would continue to deteriorate. He ended the call with a simple statement. Transfer this to me. Later that evening, he sat alone in his office, staring out at the glittering Chicago skyline. His daughters were asleep at home, safe and warm. But somewhere across the city, Mariah was likely pacing a hospital corridor, drowning in fear. She hadn't told him. Of course she hadn't. Her pride was as fierce as her kindness, and she would rather suffer in silence than risk being seen as dependent. But Daniel couldn't stand by. Not when the woman who had brought light back into his daughters' lives was carrying burdens no one should carry alone. The next morning, arrangements were quietly made. Through the Bennett Foundation, one of the Spallanzero, his philanthropic arms, an anonymous donation was processed to cover the entire cost of Seven Lillian's surgery and all related hospital expenses. The foundation also ensured funds were set aside for rehabilitation and aftercare. At the same time, Daniel made another call, this one to a real estate contact. Within 48 hours, the overdue rent on Mariah's apartment was paid in full, along with 3 additional months in advance. The payment appeared under the guise of a community assistance program. It was the kind of work Daniel understood well. Solving problems with precision, creating order out of chaos. But this time, it wasn't for shareholders or board members. It was for Mariah, for the woman who had given his family pancakes on a night when kindness mattered more than money. When Mariah received the hospital's call, she nearly dropped the laundry she was folding at a G's. Her friend Kesha's cramped apartment. Miss Evans, I'm calling with good news, the billing officer said. Your grandmother's surgery has been fully funded by an anonymous donor. Everything surgery, recovery, rehabilitation is covered. We've scheduled her procedure for tomorrow morning. Mariah gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. I don't understand. Who would? Why would someone? I'm afraid I can't provide details. The donation was made with strict anonymity. When the call ended, Mariah sat in stunned silence. Relief washed over her in waves so powerful she thought she might collapse. For weeks, she had been fighting a losing battle. Against numbers, begging the universe for mercy. And suddenly, miraculously, her grandmother's life was saved. Her hands shook as she called the hospital back, just to confirm it wasn't a mistake. But it was real. Lillian would get her surgery. That evening, another call came, this time from her landlord. Miss Evans? Your rent has been paid. Back payments and 3 months forward. Some program selected you for assistance. You can move back in immediately. Mariah pressed her forehead against the wall, tears spilling down her cheeks. It was too much, too sudden, too perfectly timed. She knew. Deep down, she knew. It was Daniel. The surgery went smoothly. 4 hours of tense waiting later, Dr. Martinez emerged with a tired smile. She came through beautifully. With proper rehabilitation, your grandmother will regain her strength. Mariah wept openly, clutching the doctor's hand in gratitude. When she entered Lillian's room, she found her grandmother pale but smiling. See? Lillian whispered. Didn't I tell you? God works in mysterious ways. Mariah sat at her bedside, holding her hand. Grandma. I think I know who helped us. But I don't know how to thank him. Or if I even should. Baby girl, Lillian said softly, it's not charity when it's given with love. Whoever did this, they did it because they care about you. But Mariah wasn't sure she could accept that. Gratitude wrestled with pride inside her chest. Like two stubborn animals refusing to yield. Yes, Daniel had saved them. But didn't that prove her fears, right? That to him she was a problem to be solved, a project to rescue, a line item in his endless wealth? She wanted to believe his kindness came from the same place hers had when she served pancakes to his hungry daughters. But her heart recoiled, whispering that it was different. Because he had power, and she did not. That night, as she returned to their apartment for the first time in weeks, she found herself staring at the familiar walls, as though they belonged to someone else. Their home was saved, her grandmother's health secured, her future restored, all by invisible hands she could not bring herself to acknowledge. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, I heard about your grandmother's surgery. His voice came, careful, almost neutral. How did it go? Mariah's throat tightened. Perfectly, she's going to be fine. I'm glad, he said. You must be relieved. She hesitated, then whispered, Daniel. Was it you? I don't know what you mean, he replied, though the gentleness in his tone betrayed him. You can't just pay for people's lives, she said, her voice cracking. If someone helped your family, he said softly, isn't that a good thing? Not if it makes me feel like a project. Like I owe you something I can never repay. Mariah, his voice grew more insistent now, there are no strings. No expectations. Just care. Sometimes people help because they can't stand to watch someone they love drown. The word love hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Mariah closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the grace that had been handed to her. But her pride screamed that she couldn't. That night, she lay awake beside her sleeping grandmother, staring at the ceiling. She felt trapped between gratitude and humiliation, between longing and fear. Daniel's silent generosity had saved her, but it also left her terrified of what it meant for their future. Was she strong enough to accept help without losing herself? Or would her pride force her to walk away from the one man who had given her more than money, who had given her hope? The snow had just begun to fall again when Clara and Elise burst into Harper's diner one late the fast afternoon, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Mariah looked up from behind the counter, startled by their sudden arrival without their father in sight. They climbed onto stools with a dairy aunt's determination far too serious for 7-year-olds, their matching ribbons bouncing as they settled in. Miss Mariah, Clara began, her tone solemn. We need to talk to you. About very important business. Mariah raised her brows, smiling softly at their seriousness. Oh? What kind of business? About Daddy, Elise said bluntly, folding her small arms on the counter. We know why you stopped being our friend. Mariah froze, her heart lurching. Girls, it's complicated. No, it's not, Clara interrupted with the brutal clarity only a child could muster. You think Daddy's money matters. But it doesn't. He's always had money. What he hasn't had is someone who makes him smile like you do. Mariah's breath caught. The twins leaned closer, speaking with the fierce conviction of little matchmakers who refuse to accept defeat. Daddy talks about you, Elise whispered. Like you're the most wonderful person in the world, the way he talked about Mommy, but different, happy, sad instead of just sad. Mariah blinked rapidly, her throat tightening. And, Clara added with a grin, he told Mrs. Henderson you have the kindest eyes he's ever seen. And the prettiest smile. Mariah's cheeks burned. She wanted to protest, to tell them they were wrong, but her heart betrayed her, beating wildly at the thought of Daniel speaking those words. Before she could respond, the diner door chimed again, and Daniel himself walked in. His eyes found his daughter's first, then drifted to Mariah. Embarrassment flickered across his face as he realized what had just transpired. "Girls," he said, striding toward the counter, "what did we talk about?" "No more interrogating. Miss Mariah." "But Daddy, it's true," Elise insisted. "You love her." Daniel's face flushed crimson, his gaze darting helplessly to Mariah. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The world narrowed to just the two of them, with the twins watching like eager witnesses to a secret finally unraveling. "It's true," he said at last, his voice low but steady. His eyes locked on Mariah's, unguarded. Now, filled with raw honesty. Every word of it. Mariah's breath caught. She had spent so long building walls of pride and fear, convincing herself that love between them was impossible. But here he was, not as a billionaire, not as a man of power, but as a father, as a human being, as someone who had quietly given her back her life, and asked for nothing in return. Tears blurred her vision. "I owe you a thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "For my grandmother. For the rent. For everything." "You don't owe me anything," Daniel replied firmly. "Not gratitude. Not explanations. Nothing. I did it because I care about you, because I care about your family, because you've given mine more than you'll ever realize." Mariah shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But Daniel, He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Mariah, I don't want your thanks. I don't want your pride or your fear. I want the truth. Do you care for me, the way I care for you?" Her heart hammered. Pride clawed at her throat, but love, stubborn, undeniable love, rose higher. She thought of his laughter while learning to flip pancakes, the way he listened to his daughters with patience, the way he had looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. "Yes," she whispered finally, her voice breaking. "I do." Relief flooded his features, softening them into something radiant. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel reached across the counter, taking her hand in his. Their fingers laced together as though they had been waiting for that moment all along. The twins squealed with delight, clapping their hands. "We told you," Clara shouted. "We're the best matchmakers in the world." Mariah laughed through her tears, pulling the girls into a hug. "Maybe you are." Daniel's voice was quiet but sure as he leaned closer. "No more walls, Mariah. No more pretending. It's just you and me. And them. If you'll have us." For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not shaped by fear or pride, but by love freely given and accepted. She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes, Daniel. I'll have you." And as the snow continued to fall outside, the four of them sat together in the warmth of Harper's Diner, no longer bound by wealth or circumstance, but by something far stronger. The truth of love finally spoken aloud. 1 year later, Harper's Diner glowed in a way Mariah Evans had never seen before. White roses lined the worn booths, soft lights replaced the harsh fluorescence, and laughter filled every corner of the place where her life had changed forever. It was here, surrounded by the aroma of coffee and pancakes, that Daniel Bennett knelt on one knee and asked her the question that made time stop. "Mariah, will you marry me?" With tears streaming down her face, and Clara and Elise squealing beside their grandmother, Lillian, Mariah whispered the word that sealed their future: yes. Months later, in the presence of friends and family, Mariah walked down the aisle not only as a bride, but as a woman who had fought through hardship and fear to claim happiness. She became a wife, a mother to 2 girls who had once prayed for a new mommy, and continued her studies in medicine, determined to heal others as she had healed herself. Their story closed with a truth more powerful than any wealth. Family isn't born only from blood, but from love, choice, and the courage to believe in second chances. This story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness, like a plate of pancakes, can change a life forever. Sometimes love finds us when we're at our lowest, teaching us that real family is built on compassion, not circumstance. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment with your thoughts on what kindness means to you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next journey of love, hope, and courage.